All right, everybody, here we go. So we are going to start with our first firm in this unit of called the theory of the firm, right? So this kind of starts to put everything together. We started with when to produce, right, which is economic profit of zero or more, right? Then we said how much to produce, which is marginal revenue equals marginal cost, right? That is the profit maximizing output rule, right? When marginal revenue equals marginal cost, that's your quantity of how much you produce. Right? Then we started to look at diminishing marginal returns, which sets up our marginal cost curve, right? And then we threw all these cost curves together, right? Now we have everything. Now we start to look at actually different types of firms, right? And how to analyze some of these graphs. So we start with perfect competition. Now, there are four types of firms. What makes these firms different are two key identifying factors. It's the number of firms that are in the market and what type of good do they produce. Is it homogeneous, meaning is it exactly the same as the another firm that produces in that same market, or is it differentiated? Is it completely different, right? Those are our two key identifying factors. In perfect competition, the idea here is that there are a lot of small producers and those producers produce the exact same good, right? So our best example for this is like fruits and vegetables, like farmers, right? Because the idea is, well, if one farmer produces a broccoli crown, the other farmer that produces a broccoli crown, they're the exact same good, right? You can't differentiate them, right? Apples, whatever it might be. Now you can argue, right? There's different types of flavored apples. Yeah, but the farmer who's making a Granny Smith apple, his Granny Smith is no different than another person's. All right. So that's the kind of like the best example of a perfectly competitive market. A lot of producers, well, there's a lot of small producers, a lot of small farmers, but the good that they're making is exactly the same, right? Now, why that matters is because if your good is exactly the same as another person's good, there's no way that you can set a different price than them, right? Because a person will just be like, well, no, right? There's no difference in your good. Why would I pay an extra $5 for your bok choy than another person's bok choy, right? Terrible vegetable, by the way, right? But that's the key, right? And why that matters is because if that's the case, that they can't use price, right? That they can't change their price, they can't use their good as leverage, that means that they are price takers, right? And that is our first big idea here, right? They are price takers. All right, so here we go. Let's start to set this up. All right, so if they are price takers, we start with side-by-side graphs. This is the market, all right? And this is your particular firm. Right? So what we do here is that this is the price the market has set. That is the quantity of whatever good apples are in that market, right? We draw a dotted line, and that is exactly the same price the firm will set, right? They are price takers. So when we do this, right, that means that we draw a straight line. Now, let's start to analyze what this straight line means, all right? If this is the price, this is their marginal revenue curve. It's the idea, right, that whatever price this is, $5, right, every time they sell a unit of one apple, it's an expensive apple, by the way, right? That apple is going to give them a revenue of $5. Sell the next one, revenue of $5. All right. It is also this firm's demand curve, right? It is perfectly elastic, right? And it's perfectly elastic because they can't change the price. If they change the price, nobody buys it, right? And that's because they are price takers, right? So that is their demand curve. It's also their average revenue curve, right? The average revenue they receive from each unit sold, and it's also the price, right, which we know from the market, right? So there you go. Now, this is Mr. Darp, all right? Pleasure to meet you, right? So there you go. That is just a little stupid way of remembering that, right? This is Mr. Darp. Marginal revenue equals demand equals average revenue equals price, right? So now, when you start to think about this, like let's say this is a market for apples, right? And whatever, the science has found that apples can reduce your cause for cancer. That would be a demand shift right, right? It's a change in preferences. More people would want it, right? So we would have a new quantity demanded, and we'd have a new price. Okay? So now our market price is right there. What we would do is go right over with it, and that is now the price the firm would take. And this is now our marginal revenue equals demand equals average revenue equals price curve, right? So price takers, first big idea with perfectly competitive markets or firms, because their good is exactly the same as anybody else's, right? They can't use a set a different price. People will leave that market. Perfectly elastic demand curve. Now, let's start to throw all this together, right? So here we go. We got 3 graphs that I want to show you. Zoom in on the first one here. All right. So I already set it out where we have our Mr. DARP curve. I just label it as marginal revenue equals demand, a little shorthand there. All right. Now, let's start to throw everything that we've done so far into this. All right. So, started once again, review it, right? Economic profit. That's when you produce. If you have an economic profit of 0 or greater, you're good, right? You're using all your resources efficiently. Right? So that is the first part. How much to produce? Well, you produce by the law. Profit maximization happens when marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Don't forget it, right? And we law of diminishing marginal returns to set up our cost curves. Now, let's put our cost curves into this and let's analyze how much to produce and if this perfectly competitive firm should be producing at all, or whether they're making losses and they should get out, all right? So here we go. Price takers. Market sets the price, firm takes it, marginal revenue equals demand equals average revenue equals price, right? Throw in our marginal cost curve. What does it look like? Nike swoosh, right? We'll start with that always. It's the most important one, right? So there it is, our Nike swoosh. So how much should this firm produce? What is the quantity that this firm should put to this market, right? How much of that market is coming from this firm? Well, this firm maximizes its profit when marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Where does that happen? Right at that intersection. That's where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. That is the quantity the firm will sell, all right? So there you go, there's how much. Perfect. Now, is this firm, should they be operating? Well, in this case, we need to know about their costs, right? Their total costs, their variable costs, right? Now, we're going to leave out the average fixed cost curve. It's good to know that it's downward sloping, but when you have average total and average variable, that's really all you need. That's what we're just going to use here, all right? So if we throw in, right, an average total cost, now how do we draw it? Let's draw it right here, right? Remember, it goes down until it hits the marginal cost curve. When it intersects, that's its minimum, and then it goes up, right? And there's our average total cost curve. Now, how do you find your total costs? Well, you go from quantity up to average total costs, right? Just like you would to find your revenue, right? If I went quantity to marginal revenue curve, that point, this is all, right? If I wouldn't have drawn that total cost curve in, right? That's all total revenue, right? The marginal revenue times the quantity, right? If I said this was $5 and this is 100, the total revenue is that $5 you receive for each unit sold times the 100 sold, 500. How much are the costs? Well, I go from quantity up to where it hits my average total cost curve, right? That is the average total cost at that quantity. So it'd be $5 times the quantity sold of 100, right? So this would also then be our total costs, which would be 500, right? That would mean that in this case, we are making a normal profit, right? Because what we have here is total revenue equaling total costs, which would mean, and now remember, our total costs here, don't forget about this, right? This is both explicit and implicit, right? Because we only talk about economic profit, right? So what's happening here is our total revenue is equal to our total costs. So our economic profit equals 0, right? That is normal profit, right? Or normal, right there. Right? Perfect. So we should continue operating if you are this company, all right? That would be the first step, right? We would be breaking even at that point. Bottom line is, if you really think about it, you have positive accounting profit, right? Because if these equal total, this equals total cost, then that means that total revenue minus explicit, which is accounting profit, has to be positive, all right? So there you go, that's the first one. Now, if we move down one, right, already have our Mr. DARP set out, right, and we do the same thing, right? Here's our marginal cost curve. Nike swoosh. How much to produce? Where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. This is the quantity the firm is going to put in, right? Now, let's draw one where we have profit, right? Or greater profit, where in this case, like super normal profit, not just your normal, right? So right now, how to find total revenue? Well, this is total revenue, the quantity times the marginal revenue. Right? Now let me draw a cost, total average total cost. Right? Down until it hits marginal cost, and then up. So what are our total costs at that quantity? Well, we go from the quantity sold up to where it hits our cost curve, right, and over. And this, right, is our total cost. So now, right here, our total cost, right? And what we see is that, draw this, total revenue is greater than total cost, right? This area, I'm trying to look for a different one. Here you go. That is profit, right? That is extra profit. You are making an economic profit of more than 0, right? Now, we'll do one more, right? All right, so here we go. Mr. DARP, price taker, draw the marginal cost curve, Nike swoosh, right? Where do we produce? How much? Quantity F, right, where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, right? Now, let's draw one, right? Now, hold on, let me do this, right? This is total revenue, right? Let's draw one with economic losses, right? There's our average total cost curve. Drawing it down, bottom point where it intersects, draw it up. What are our costs at this quantity? Go from quantity up to where it hits your cost curve and over. And here you see that our total costs, if I were to draw this in, are greater than our total revenue, right? Total costs greater than total revenue. This area above that total revenue would be losses, right? And that would be in that case. Now, here's the question when we do this, right? This is showing economic losses, but how do we know if the firm should shut down, right? Well, we have this ATC, but we need to understand the variable cost curve. Remember that your shutdown point is if you cannot cover your variable costs, right? So if you can cover your variable costs, your workers, your ingredients, whatever it might be, right? then you can operate at a loss for the time being. You don't want to jump out yet, right? If you can't, then it's shut down. So if I said that this is your average variable cost curve, right there, well, we would go up from quantity up to variable costs, where it hits our average variable cost curve and over, and you would see that this area, right, is total revenue that's greater than our variable. We can cover variable costs. Here's our shutdown point, right? That means that this company would still be in the game, all right? So there's a whole bunch of things that we just added into that, right? So now we're kind of just starting to make everything fit together. We think about economic profit, where it happens in this, right? Our normal profit, right? We think about marginal revenue equaling marginal cost, our profit maximization, right? And then we can throw our cost curves in here and start to look at what different firms look like and when and how much to produce and all that good stuff, all right? Make sure you understand this. You can draw these out. You can analyze them, take the quiz, and I will see you all tomorrow.